All right, so particles, let's look at activity 2, coming out of the clean air activity. So we're going to number 2. So what does the particle look like? So basically, this activity is to try to get kids to think about what types of particles in the air and how we might measure them. And basically, this activity, this is the one with the cards, yes? We're going to demonstrate. So turn on.
And some very high-tech clear tape. And teachers, I think, generally have hole punches, so you'll need a hole punch. And then we've provided these jeweler's loops or magnifying glasses that have light. They have little lights, actually. But with high schools, a lot of times they might have access to higher-powered microscopes, and in which case it will probably be much more interesting to look at the particles that the students collect with those higher power microscopes as opposed to this jeweler's loop. So the basis of this activity is the students will collect particles on this note card. So they're going to punch, maybe a few holes in the note card, and then take the clear tape without touching it, because that will leave, with trying not to touch it too much, that leaves a nice fingerprint on the tape. And the key here is, so they'll put it over the hole they punched. And then when they set it out, they're going to want to obviously set it out sticky side up. The teacher's guide or the student workbook recommends folding it and taping it down, but really any way that they think they can collect particles, they can do any configuration with this note card. And then they'll do some other, wherever they set it out, they'll write where they set it out, for how long, when they put it out, when they collect it. And you'll really want to have the students think about, where do you think you can collect particles? One of the nice things about this activity is that because these materials are so cheap, the students can use more than one note card. And so they might then look at, particles in different locations. So for example, what do particles look like that are collected under a tree versus particles that are collected near your dog's bed at home? So I think that is the basis. And then this note card is also used for both activity 2 and activity 3. So it's a little tidbit there. And then we're going to ask you guys, for the people who are coming back this afternoon for the activities, we have some note cards, and actually this whole punch will be put back on the left table back there. If you want to take a note card and set up your own experiment, go set it somewhere, while you're eating lunch, and then grab it. Well, we can either, grab it together or grab it before you come back. We can look at, particles that you collect around the South Coast campus.
Great. And this activity, because it's pretty easy to do, we've gotten a lot of interesting results. The kids will be like, oh, if I put it up on the wall, am I going to get more than if it's on the floor? What happens if, we might suggest, well, maybe if you put it somewhere and then you sweep, or something like that. And then one of the things that would come up would be like, what's this pink particle? And it would be like, okay, well, where did you put the card? Oh, it was in my bedroom. What kind of colors of things are in your room? Like, is that fuzz from, something that you were wearing, or from your rug, or, so it was, it gets a lot of questions going, and because it's pretty easy to see those kinds of things, but also sometimes you can't see what you've collected, right? Because we've just talked about how small some of these particles are. So it gets a lot of conversation going. So really what you're trying to do is get the kids to place them in many different locations, and thinking about why you might place it there. And then they're going to look at the particles and then talk about particle size and where you collected them, and then also kind of you can do a calculation of the rate of particle deposition. If you can count the particles and you know how long that the card was out there, then you can do some calculations. We get them to do some math. So particles, as I mentioned, come in different shapes and sizes and colors, and if you actually Google images for particles, it's pretty cool stuff. The one on the left here are like spores and pollen, and they're really cool shapes. They're kind of alien shapes, really, spikes, and they're pretty interesting. And you can, if they're big enough, you can see them. And and recently I was like thinking we need to put some of these cards out the next time there's pollination going on in our, like, you know, you got to your car and it's covered with pollen. It's like that needs to be a trigger for us to put some cards out there and then save them, because, you know, we just forget, right? It's like, oh man, look at my car, I gotta do my windshield wiper, and it's like that's when we should be doing some. So we have some examples, but and then this one here is showing sand. So this is the demo that, you know, that we just talked about. Sorry. So any questions kind of on this activity? Yes. Hopefully we're not finding any asbestos. Right? So that hasn't come up. I mean, again, you could, I mean, one of the things about these kinds of trainings, we're all gonna have different stories about our experience, and if you guys have had experience with asbestos, that would be a story you could talk about. But again, I'm hoping we're not finding any. That would be bad, right? Any other questions? You know, and I think a part of teaching is, you know, part of these things is to make people interested. So it's really kind of coming up with, and obviously personal stories are the most interesting. So I think those are the kinds of anecdotes and things that we can bring up. But I think it'd be good to say, you know, let's say you knew a school had asbestos, what do you call it? Remediation, thank you. And it might be something like, here's why we did that. You know, here's why your school did that. So it makes a personal story for the school. So. Yeah. Another one's lead paint. Like if you see paint chips or something, that'd be like, oh, you know, that's been a problem with some pieces. You can't tell there's lead in the paint or not when you're looking at it, but it'd be like, this can be a problem in some places.